Sur ces images aériennes, le centre spatial guyanais de Kourou et plus spécialement le bâtiment Jupiter 2. Jupiter 2, c'est de là que nous suivrons en direct le vol Ariane Espace 124. Mesdames, Mesdemoiselles, Messieurs, bonjour. Ce vol Ariane 124 mettra en orbite le satellite d'observation Helios 1B. Pour m'assister dans les commentaires en français, Claude Bernat d'Ariane Espace. Et pour les téléspectateurs anglophones, eh bien, c'est Joshua Jean-Paul qui assurera le commentaire. Hello, Joshua.
Hi, Pierre, and hi, everybody. Welcome to Kourou for today's live broadcast of Ariane Space flight number 124. We're launching tonight. The main passenger is Helios 1B. That's Europe's eye in the sky. And as you can see, we're launching in full daylight, which doesn't happen every day. So we hope you'll stay with us. We have a fine show set up for you. Before we get underway, however, we want you to take a look first at some shots of the gantry withdrawal, which took place about 5.5 hours ago, just behind us here.
Comme vient de vous le dire Joshua, eh bien oui, 6 heures avant H0, il y a une opération importante qui se déroule, c'est le retrait portique qui se déroule juste derrière nous. Explication en images.
The gantry was removed earlier today. Weighing in at over 800 tons, it's one of Europe's largest mobile structures. It protects the launch vehicle from the elements and provides access to service the launcher before it lifts off. Once the gantry is removed, the Ariane launcher can be seen for the very first time in its full assembly, including the fairing. The gantry is pulled back about 80 meters. This is also done to situate the launcher in the open air while her third stage is being filled. It's one of the last major operations of this final countdown. But you'll be seeing other important events during the broadcast tonight. First of all, the launcher campaign. We'll take a look to see how the Ariane 40 vehicle is put together stage by stage. Then we'll take a look at the satellite campaign for Helios 1B, tonight's passenger, to learn how that spacecraft is assembled and tested. And finally, we have a special film coming up for you, which will explain what we call the automatic sequence, which begins at -6 minutes before liftoff. And welcome again, everybody, to Kourou, the home of Ariane. As you can see, we have a beautiful day for our daytime launch, the first in a long time, and we hope you're as excited as we are here. We should have some beautiful shots coming up in just under half an hour. The clock is ticking away. All is green, as you can see. The panels are green, and the sky is blue, and what more could you ask for? 8th launch of the year tonight. You see the VIPs in the Jupiter building who've come down to enjoy it with us, and with you, we hope we'll be with you for the next roughly hour and 10 minutes. The VIP is looking down into the fishbowl where the operational people, the technicians from Ariane Space, the European Space Agency, and the French Space Agency, CNES, along with the customers, the representatives of the passenger tonight, the people from Helios 1B. Everyone eyes forward on those green status panels, and we'll be back with more on that. But first, the latest news from the launch pad. We open our top of the broadcast news page tonight with the last word on an important Ariane 5 mission coming up in 1 week. December 10th is the date for flight 504. The new generation launcher will lift off from its pad here at Kourou, ELA-3, carrying its very first commercial payload, XMM, the X-ray multi-mirror mission, a space observatory for the European Space Agency. Ariane Space flight number 123 was successfully launched on November 13th with a single payload of GE4. The launcher was originally configured with 4 solid boosters, but the first stage was changed a month before liftoff to fit 2 solids and 2 liquids on. 2 missions remain for Ariane to round out the year, 504 on December 10th and a Galaxy 11th on December 21st. And on November 24th, the Colibri was christened in Rotterdam, giving Ariane Space a much-needed second cargo freighter, along with the Toucan already in service, to ship the parts of Ariane 4 and Ariane 5 launch vehicles from Europe to Kourou. Need for a second ship was realized due to our stepped-up launch rate. Right, all is green, as you can see. 24 minutes until launch of the Ariane 4.0. We're coming to you, as we always do, from the Jupiter 2 building in Kourou, the technical center here, which is the nerve center of the space base. You have about 1,400 people working across the base and all the different posts, the weather and the logistics and safety and all the rest. And our cameras are mainly here. We can't be everywhere. We do have some cameras up at the launch directorate, and we'll be taking you there in just a minute. Ariane Space Chair Jean-Marie Luton. It's a good time maybe to take a look at a film on the Ariane Space Company.
Versatile, flexible, powerful.
Attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée. Top moins 7 minutes. Donc les H0 moins 3 minutes. Correct.
Déroulement correct.
À tous, l'idéo, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Top. Allumage Vulcain. Allumage ERP. Décollage. Propulsion normale. Tous les paramètres sont normaux à bord. Trajectoire normale.
All okay on board.
Ready to serve your business.
Ready to serve your business. That's the Ariane Space Company, soon celebrating 20 years of service, serving the space business. Christmas Eve 1979, the first Ariane went up, so there'll be some celebrating here in just 3 weeks. We're going to take a look at some of the operational people. We're going to look probably now at the mission director. Mission director, there he is. Didier Casse. He's an Ariane Space person, and next to him will be Philippe Maubert, who is a CNES CSG, Centre Spatial Guyanais person. There he is. He's the DDO. We'll get back to him because he's going to be calling out some of the milestones. We promised you first to look at the launcher campaign, and here we go.
The launch vehicle campaign started on Wednesday, the 3rd of November, with the erection of the various stages and the positioning of the equipment bay. It was followed by the final preparation of engines, tightness and electrical systems checkout operations. Then, the engine protection and the thermal insulation devices were put in place. Following the synthesis control, which took place on the 18th of November, the launch vehicle was transferred to the launch area on the 19th of November.
This is the launch control center. They are a lot closer to the pad than we are. They're about 14 kilometers to the northwest of us. It's called the CDL. These men and women are inside a blockhouse with walls about a meter thick. The man who runs the blockhouse up there, Philippe Ers, called the COEL. They're all carrying out the final checks now on the launch vehicle. For those of you unfamiliar with the launch vehicle, Ariane stands about 57 meters tall, 3 powered stages. The first 2 stages with storable propellant, and the third stage with liquid hydrogen and oxygen, 10 tons of it. On top of that is the vehicle equipment bay, which is the computer, where the computers are located, and on top of that is the fairing, and inside the fairing tonight, Helios 1B and the little Clementine, which we'll get back to, the micro also going up. Helios people inside the fishbowl. We have representatives from the 3 cooperating nations, the French, Italians, and the Spanish, tonight, and you'll be seeing them. We have a film now on the Helios program. It'll be in 2 parts, and we'll come back to you after the end of the first.
To prevent crises, to check the enforcement of treaties, to follow the movement of populations, to help in engaging our forces, to assess damage. Military and state space observation requirements have rapidly increased in comparison with initial strategic targets. The users are also more diversified, ranging from governmental appreciation of situations to the theatre commander's in-field or tactical activities, enlarging the palette of sensors providing input for his so-called C3I system, command, control, communications, intelligence. International law concerning overflight by observation satellites guarantees direct access to areas previously inaccessible by conventional means. Acquiring dedicated military satellites enables autonomous and confidential management of imagery requests, ensuring a precious gain in time in the race for information and the acquisition of images of unequaled quality. Since 1995, with the launching of Helios 1A, France, Italy and Spain have joined the very select club of world powers possessing such a tool. That launch was the first stage in the military optical satellite program conducted jointly by the general staffs of the 3 countries, the Délégation Générale pour l'Armement and the Centre National d'Études Spatiales. To ensure worldwide coverage, the Helios satellites travel in low orbit, more or less along the meridians. The images are produced line by line as the satellite travels along its orbit. To make the images easier to interpret, the satellites pass over each point of the globe at a fixed sun time. By tilting to the left or to the right, the satellite is capable during each pass of imaging a large area on the ground on either side of the nadir. This provides much faster access to the site selected. Imagery priorities are defined every day in each country according to operational urgency and weather forecasts. The prioritized imaging lists received from the 3 countries are sent to the main French center to construct the satellite's daily work plan. Each country programs its images confidentially, but certain common objectives relevant to areas of joint interest for the cooperating parties enable the operation of the system to be optimized, meaning that the armed forces and the intelligence services of the 3 Helios 1 countries must cooperate on a daily basis.
Okay.
The satellite's work plan is then transmitted by the Orbit Control Center located at CNES in Toulouse to the satellite as soon as it's in view of one of the telecommand stations. The images are acquired by the satellite as it passes over the targets. They're stored on board and then retransmitted to the ground when the satellite is within the reception station's visibility range. Each main center receives its own images. Once processed, these images are analyzed by photo interpreters.
Right, we got some helicopter shots of Ariane on the launch base now. It looks beautiful. We hope the chopper will be able to track the launch at liftoff. We'll wait and see. Very rare to get these shots. The first part of the film you saw told us mainly what Helios does and what it has done since its launch 4 years ago. The second part of the film coming up will be all the improvements since launch and what Helios 1B will be bringing to the Helios family. The Helios program, a three-way cooperation, as we mentioned, between the French and the Italians and the Spanish, not unlike the cooperation going on here at Kourou between ESA, CNES, and Ariane. Here's part 2 of your film.
Fast access to information is of prime importance for managing crises and preparing operations by armed forces. The Helios 1 system is constantly improved to reduce the time required to deliver images. Thus, the commissioning by France in 1998 of a transportable theatre station enables imaging requests to be formulated, and the images, once produced, are received directly at the operations theatre. Also providing the end users with remote application filing stations and Helios photo interpretation stations as near as possible to the users again contributes towards reducing lead times for urgent images. The initial operational capability of Helios 1B at the end of 1999 will again improve the Helios services thanks to twin satellite operation. Indeed, the relative positions of Helios 1A and Helios 1B will be optimized to provide very fast access to any site on Earth. This new satellite, almost identical to Helios 1A, was stored at the prime contractor's Matra Marconi Space in Toulouse before being reactivated for launch. By its increased dumping flexibility of the images acquired according to their degree of urgency, the Helios 1B satellite reduces the time required to obtain information, thus meeting the operative's constant requirement. Since 1995, the Helios system has made its mark as an essential tool for the sovereignty of France, Italy and Spain. This program, to which all the French, Italian and Spanish industrial companies in the space sector are proud to have contributed, is an indisputable technical success. What's more, gradually mastering the vast capacities offered by the Helios system has optimized its insertion into the intelligence system. Tomorrow, the Helios 2 system, which benefits from the experience gained on Helios 1 and whose production is now well underway, will implement decisive developments. Improved agility of the satellite in orbit, enabling a greater number of images to be acquired. A reduction in the age of the information, an improvement in resolution, or again, detection of activity indications by day and night by adding infrared capabilities. Already, the performances of the Helios 1 system are the keystone of a permanent and trailblazing operational cooperation placed at the service of Europe's common foreign and security policy. By the beginning of the 21st century, Helios 2 will be equipped with technical assets enabling it to enlarge the way paved by Helios 1. To see together, to decide together, and then to act together.
Right, acting together, the French, Spanish, and the Italians. They came in under budget on this program, we're told, which is also pretty remarkable, and congratulations to them. But enough of that for now. While you were watching those pictures, we had our last weather check, which occurs at 10 minutes minus 10 minutes. And the weather is, of course, very good, as you saw from the shots. Wind at 7 meters per second, which is optimal conditions. No risk of storm for the entire day. Little evolution expected. 35 kilometers of visibility. So we should have some nice shots. We may be able to track the launcher up to third stage ignition. Back up at the CDL. Final checks for them. These crews here work only on the launch, on the liftoff section of things. Once the launcher takes off, their work is done. You see the Atlantic in the Atlantic Ocean in the background there. Before that, the Amazon rainforest. We are on the base here, 18 kilometers on the northern coast of Kourou, in South America, of course. From here we can shoot to the east and to the north. We go east more often with the telecom satellites because about 3/4 of Ariane space business is there. But we are going very rarely tonight to the north, where we put satellites into eventually polar orbit, or what they call sun synchronous orbit, the satellites that are inside that fairing there. The 123rd Ariane launch tonight.
The spacecraft Helios 1B arrived in Guyana on the 4th of October and was transported to building S1B, where it went through an integration procedure for 6 weeks. Following that preparation, it was transferred to the filling building S3B for another 2 weeks of operations. In parallel, the microsatellite Clementine was prepared and integrated onto the ASAP platform. 2 half fairings were placed on the 2 satellites. The sequence of encapsulation resulted into the production of a composite on which the satellite logos were placed. All those operations were completed by the transfer of the composite from building S3B to the launch tower, the hoisting and the placement of the composite on the 3rd stage.
So now you know everything about the satellite campaign, which, like the launcher, has its own campaign. Back to the helicopter shots again. The Ariane 4 standing on its pad, waiting. You see the gantry pulled back, which happened, as we mentioned, earlier in the day. All eyes are forward at the green status panels and at the computers as people are watching the information coming in from all across the base, which continues to tell the story, and the story is good, all is green, and we are go for launch in about 6 minutes. Now, in about 6 minutes, you're going to hear the DDO. It's the fellow on the right in the middle of your screen, Mr. Moller.
À tous de DDO. Attention pour le début de la séquence synchronisée. Top H0 moins 6 minutes.
Okay, we are moving into this minus 6 minute synchronized sequence, which is a very important sequence, the last moments of the final countdown. And what's happening is the computers are taking over. Power is passing from the ground to the launcher itself. There are 2 computers that check out the fluids and the electronic systems on board, and they'll take us down to liftoff. Now, we have a short film on that. You're going to see an 8-second liftoff sequence of an earlier flight. It's not tonight. Don't be confused.
The most critical operations before launch will take place at CDL2. H0 minus 6 minutes, beginning of the automatic launch sequence. During those 6 minutes, both IDA systems, the one controlling the electrical systems, CCE, and the one controlling the mechanical and fluid systems, CCF, will be synchronized on the countdown to carry out a given number of actions. Surveillance of parameters critical for the launch vehicle, switching on of electric relays, closure or opening of valves, pressurizations of tanks. Those actions will gradually bring the launch vehicle and the ground system associated to it from a standby state, which could last for several hours, to a ready-to-launch state. As the countdown goes by, the 3rd stage tanks will be pressurized and isolated. The safety valves will open. The control systems of the 1st stage will be started. The final barriers on the pyrotechnical systems will be lifted. The closer we get to H0, the more critical the state of the launch vehicle becomes. i.e. if the synchronized sequence was to stop for one reason or the other, more and more time and actions will be required to come back to a standby configuration ready for a new sequence.
V124 terminé. Moins une minute CCE.
Moins une CCF en cours.
Commutation générale sur bord.
Attente moins 28 CCF.
PF correct. Moins 40 CCE. Début d'ouverture VHP. Démarrage servomoteur. PF correct. VHP ouverte. Moins 27 CCE.
Moins 28 CCF.
Début d'ouverture VS. PFS correct. Moins 21 CCE. Armement lanceur. LH correct. VS ouverte. PFS correct.
At minus 12 seconds, the flight program starts. Minus 5, the cryotechnical arms open, and at H0, the L22 engines ignite.
Unité, feu.
These computers that she mentioned in the film are checking everything that's vital to the mission success and safety. Launching anything, of course, is a very complex affair in Arianespace, and everybody else here wanting to make sure everything is letter perfect. The sort of things that they're checking out are authorizing the final arming of the more hazardous units, like the explosive cords, for instance, that are used to separate the stages, and you'll see that a little bit in a little bit more detail later. They're also loading the exact ignition time into the onboard computer, which is right above those feeder arms. We want to take you to a shot that is the last thing that you're going to see before liftoff, coming up in a moment. The cryotechnic arms, those are the arms in the yellow square there that are feeding the third stage, the liquid hydrogen and oxygen. There's a split screen image of it. Now, the reason it's important is it's the last thing you see before liftoff. These arms have to swing open away from the launcher for the launcher to leave the pad. Now, what these computers are doing, the same computers we're talking about, is that when the countdown goes down to H0, the motors on the first stage are ignited. And then we have a 3.1 second wait until we get a 0.5 second parameter check and analysis of the pressure in those engines to make sure the pressure is all right. Same computers, again, we're talking about are doing that. In 1 second after 3.1, at plus 4.1 seconds, we have a second 0.5 second check to verify and to confirm and to give the okay to go. And then at plus 4.2 seconds, if all is okay, the computer gives the order to throw open the launch hooks, which hold the first stage to the launch pad, and then away we go at 4.4 seconds. So in other words, we have from ignition time to liftoff, we have 4.5 seconds wait. Coming up on the 1 minute mark, now you hear the DDO call out that milestone too.
À tous de DDO, attention pour moins une minute. Top, H0 moins une minute.
At minus 1 minute, in other words, right now the launcher equipment is switching over to its onboard batteries. That means the launcher, the Ariane, is being powered up from its own onboard power supply now. As we mentioned before, power is passing from the ground to the launch vehicle. At minus 40 seconds, we'll have the starting up of the guidance motors for the first stage. Less than half a minute to go for tonight's launch of Helios 1B for the French and the Italian and the Spanish armies, Europe's eye in the sky, as we mentioned. You'll hear the DDO call out the final 10 seconds. We will leave you. We'll pull away. We'll be back once Ariane has cleared the tower. Enjoy the launch, everybody.
À tous de DDO, attention pour le décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage. bord sont normaux.
Up into the blue, some very fine shots of this beautiful launch. You see the 4 Viking 5 engines burning. The DDO says all is normal. Nominal on board as Ariane rises into the sky. You saw her climb for about 16...
Les paramètres bord sont normaux.
Everything on board is normal, he says. You saw her climb for about 16
Fin de
seconds.
la manœuvre en roulis.
That's the time needed to clear the pad. Now she's going to swivel over. You see launchers doing this sometime. There she goes. She's turning, tilting. That's for better radio and telemetry contact with the ground. The antennas are on that side. You saw on liftoff maybe some panels falling away from the second stage. That's quite normal. That's a thermal shield, which is supposed to break away when the launcher lifts off. There you see her switching over. First stage will burn for about 3 minutes and then be dropped in the drink in the Atlantic.
Tous les paramètres bord sont normaux.
Everything on board is normal, says the DDO. One of the advantages of launching at this site is that you can drop stages back into the ocean where nobody will get hit on the head with them. We have no boosters tonight, as you can see. You see the 4 points of light pushing Ariane up. The first stage, when it's burned out, will separate at roughly 74 kilometers altitude, and we'll have some figures coming up which will show you that, along with the speed. Now she's not coming back down to the ground.
Les paramètres bord sont normaux.
You can see the camera's just following her as she passes overhead. Everything on board is normal. No boosters tonight. We mentioned Helios weighs about 2.5 tons. Clementine another 50 kilos.
Extinction premier étage.
That was the first stage burnout.
Séparation premier et deuxième étage.
And that was the separation of the first and second
Allumage
stage.
deuxième étage.
And the second stage is just lit. A very clear
Les paramètres
pictures.
bord sont normaux.
All is normal on board. Very clear pictures tonight. We're up into the second stage burn now. The first stage burned a couple of tons of fuel per second and gave Ariane the speed it needed. She's going to need for her mission. We're at roughly 73, 75 kilometers up now. The stage separation you saw is done by these pyrotechnic cords that we mentioned. And now on the left-hand side here,
bord sont normaux.
all is normal, he says. The cursor climbing up the graph on the left-hand side of your screen, coming up to the point where it says sep-quaff, that's separation of the fairing. And you'll hear the DDO call out that in just a moment.
Séparation des coiffes.
There's the fairing separation. You see on the lower right-hand side of your screen, the moyen is the means by which we're tracking the launcher. That's the computer. S is the slant, is the inclination. A is
Les
altitude.
paramètres bord sont normaux. La trajectoire est normale.
Normal trajectory and normal propulsion. A on your screen again is altitude. V, of course, is velocity. Second stage is burning 1 Viking 4 engine, similar to the engines on the first stage. Burned for about a minute and a half. Will take Ariane up to about 150 kilometers altitude. The cursor climbing up to SEP 2-3, that's separation of the second and third stage. The reason we can let the fairing go
Les
now...
paramètres bord sont normaux et stables.
The reason we can let the fairing go now is because it protects the satellite from the harmful Earth elements, wind and rain and sun and all the rest, because satellites are not made to work down here. They're made to work in space. That's why they're kept in clean rooms. Ariane is now up there in a less harmful environment, of course. We try to avoid what we call payload pollution. The fairing is 2 half shells.
Extinction deuxième étage.
There's the second stage burnout.
Séparation 2-3, allumage troisième étage.
And second stage separation. You can see it on the upper right-hand corner. And the third stage has begun burning. Ariane moving at about 5 kilometers a second now. That's about half the speed she's going to need to separate Helios.
Les paramètres bord sont normaux.
We're doing fine on board. We're at about coming up on 4 kilometers a second. 280 kilometers up. The third stage, that's the big one, with the 10 tons of cryogenic fuel, liquid hydrogen and oxygen, will burn for about 13 minutes. And this gives us some time to stretch out, and we can talk a little bit about the satellite, and we can talk a little bit about the Ariane V124, the version that we're using tonight, because it's rather rare that we do that. Everything is working just fine on board. Tonight's 90-second launch of an Ariane 4 vehicle. We're into 6 minutes of flight.
Trajectoire normale, paramètres normaux.
Trajectory normal and parameters are normal, says the DDO. So we have a few things to tell you while we're waiting for the third stage burn. This very long third stage burn, 10 tons of cryogenic fuel, used for the first time, by the way, outside of the United States on Ariane's first launch. The Christmas Eve launch in '79.
Il reste 11 minutes de propulsion.
11 minutes remain for the third stage burn, says the DDO. We could go now to some of the topics which we like to discuss with you during the third stage burn. I think before we get to that, though, it might be time for our Ariane Space Quiz, our regular feature. Tonight's question, Ariane Space Quiz number 124. Are you ready? We want to know how many military, or shall we say government, satellites Ariane has launched prior to tonight. Your question again, quiz number 124, how many military or government satellites have been launched by Arianespace before tonight? Now, I know it sounds easy, but there's one or two that you might miss. So while you're thinking about that, we'll have the answer for you in a minute. But before we do, we want to go to some milestones. Now, we mentioned 20 years of service coming up for Ariane. That'll be on Christmas Eve. Every day in December, practically, there's some sort of milestone in 20 years of service.
Les paramètres bord sont normaux.
December 22nd in '97, Flight 104, we launched an Intelsat, and that was the 12th launch of that year, which was a record. It was also the shortest interval between commercial launches, only 19 days. So the rhythm, we talked about the rhythm, which is picking up in the earlier part of the broadcast in the news page, when they mentioned, when they talked about Colibri. It's the DGA people. DGA people down here representing the defense minister. December 17th, Ariane launches the very first DBS satellite. That was in 1993.
Trajectoire normale, paramètres normaux.
That was for Hughes, DBS-1. Flight 62, a TICOM, went up on that flight too. Flight 27 on December 11th, you had an Astra and a Skynet placed into orbit by an Ariane 44 LP. That was in 1988. So every day, well, every month, the last 20 years, milestones as Ariane blazes away into the paving new roads in the space sector, and another big milestone coming up in just 1 week with Flight 504 and XMM.
Le pilotage est stable.
All right, you're looking at the generals and the military representatives of the Italian and Spanish and French governments who are who have been invited down here to enjoy the launch. We have some other invited guests. There's Michel Mignot, who's the director of the Space Center. Everybody waiting. This is the waiting part of the mission. Spacecraft waiting to be separated. And the people, the operational people, the VIPs, and yourselves as much as we are waiting for the news. Another 9 minutes, roughly, of propulsion before separation of Helios 1B, which will go join its brother or its sister, if you like, in its orbit. We'll have a couple of words on Helios in just a moment. I want to talk first, though, about the Ariane 40, tonight's version. Tonight, we mentioned, is the 92nd Ariane 4 vehicle. There's Ariane Space Director General, young lady, Françoise Bouzitat, surrounded by all the generals. 92nd Ariane 4, we said, but only the 7th Ariane 40, the version with no boosters. Now you see on the lower left-hand side of your screen the satellite coming up on the curve to H10. H10 is another name for the third stage. That's when the third stage will run out of gas. And you see the Helios 1B separation, the point right after that. The former space minister for France.
Il reste 7 minutes de propulsion, la trajectoire est normale et les paramètres sont normaux.
Everything is normal aboard, as you hear the DDA say. Another right about 7 more minutes to go. You see the separation of Helios 1B, the point on the curve, and after that you have the Clementine separation. Only the 7th version of the Ariane 40. And why so rare? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 before, and the first one, Flight 35 in January of 1990, put up Spot 2, also built by Matra, tonight's constructor. That was the very first use of the adapter called the ASAP, which we're also using tonight. Spot 2 went up with some microsats for the UK and the US. The next Ariane 40 flight in 91, July 91, Flight 44. ERS-1, along with some other micros, EUOSat, Orbcom for the UK and the US, Seratubsat for France and for Germany. Flight 59 was the next Ariane 40 in September of 93. Spot 3, again a Matra satellite, with a whole slew of micros and minis.
Acquisition par la station de télémesure de Wallops en Virginie.
All right, we have just, the GDO says, been picked up by our first downrange tracking station at Wallops Island. A word about Wallops, it's off the Carolinas. It's an island, it's a NASA station. But the international accords, of course, between countries make it all possible to share stations. The Wallops Island station is a telemetry-only station, and normally we use radar and telemetry.
Les paramètres sont normaux.
Normally, we need radar and telemetry. We don't need another radar station because the radio station here at Kourou can see far enough all the way north. The Wallops station will see all the main events except what we call H5, which is the passivization, which comes after the separation of the satellite, where we empty the 3rd stage of fuel. That's not on our broadcast anyway. It comes after. We wouldn't see it. But we do need the Prince Albert station.
5 minutes de propulsion.
We do need the Prince Albert station up in Canada to see that one. 5 more minutes of the 3rd stage.
Paramètres bord normaux et stable.
Getting back to our Ariane 4 0, so we have Spot 2, ERS-1, Spot 3. ERS-2 was Flight 72 in April 95. That was the first 40 to go without any microsatellites. Also the first 40 plus, what we call a beefed up 40. Flight 75, which we've already talked about, July of 95, was Helios 1A. That was the 50th launch that time from ELA-2. And the last 4.0 launch, a little more recently, March of last year, Flight 107, was Spot 4. So these satellites, these missions, always to the north, to polar orbit, or to what we call SSO, Sun Synchronous Orbit, just like tonight's flight number 124. A word about the satellite now, since we're coming up on Helios. A big priority for the armies. When you consider it's the only high-resolution satellite in service outside the U.S. and Russia, the 3 governments involved, the Spanish and the French and the Italians, wanting quicker access to information.
3 minutes de propulsion.
To information. As a matter of fact, the press conference this morning, the point was made. One of the generals was asked, "What do you need 1B for?" And he evoked the old adage, which says, "Information is like fish. If it ain't fresh, it's no good." So H1A, since its launch in 95, has been regularly providing these 3 governments with pictures, but the demand has just gone up. And the second satellite will give them twice as many. 1B will make the system more flexible and give them better pictures, better global coverage. The Helios program, you could almost say, was born by a similar drive that pushed the Europeans to get in the launcher business in the first place, and that is independence. It was mainly the Gulf War in '91, which showed the Europeans what a vital tool space-based observation is, and they wanted their own satellites, no more relying on others. The 1A we mentioned launched in '95, and 1B tonight, and
Tous les paramètres sont stables.
The Helios 2 program, due to launch in '03, they're trying to maintain a rhythm of every 4 years. France, we mentioned the main driver behind the program, with 79%, but soon after began in '86.
Fin de poursuite par la station télémesure de Kourou.
Soon after the program got the okay, Italy came in. That was in 1987, and Spain the year afterward. It's quite cooperation. The partners use the satellite every day. They can share information, or they can have private access to their individual national security matters. Two more minutes in the third stage burn. Coming up now, there's a big ground system, as you can imagine, for the Helios program. 6 centers in all. This includes the main Helios center, which is near Paris, staffed by about 100 people. There's also the same in Rome and in Madrid. These centers set up the satellite's work schedule every day. There's also image receiving centers, one in each country. In France, it's in Alsace. In Colmar, another 100 people there.
Il reste 1 minute de propulsion.
In Italy, it's down south in Lecce, and the Maspaloma station in the Canary Islands for Spain. These national centers establish user demand run by the National Air Force. Helios 2, they say, is on its way. With that program began in 1994. First launch we mentioned, they're aiming at '03. That is, I think, a $1.7 billion program. If those figures aren't right, give me a call up here in the booth at 35862. This is Ariane Interactive. The Helios 2 will have the same platform as Spot 5. It'll be a lot bigger, though. They're looking at 4.5 tons instead of the 2.5 in tonight's flight. The reason we mentioned it has the same platform as Spot 2 is because the Helios program benefited from the
Extension
technology.
3e étage.
There's the end of the third stage burn. Right on time. Now we have
Début de première orientation.
We have a series of maneuvers now to orient the spacecraft and the composite in the direction it needs to be separated. We need about 2 minutes for that, and then we should come up with satellite separation. Helios, we mentioned benefiting from spot technology.
Séparation Helios 1B.
And there's the news. Much quicker than we thought. Oh, you hear the applause from the invited guests here as Helios 1B successfully separated Ariane. In her mission, there's the microsat Clementine coming up. I don't know if we're going to get to see that. But we should have a replay of the launch coming up, maybe even 2 replays, depending, and maybe some helicopter shots. And as soon as we have those ready, we'll pass them along to you. But happy faces that appreciated the separation of their satellite Helios 1B. Now that it's up, I'll tell you what Helios is going to be doing. After the usual deployments and checkouts to see if the satellite is in good health, the first picture, they say, should be available in 2 days. Placing the satellite, locating it will take a few days, they say. All checks and preparing for operations will take roughly 3 months total. Testing should begin in about 48 hours. Part of the tests include testing image quality, as you can imagine. And once up, the satellite will be controlled by the CNES down in Toulouse at their station, which is called the Operations Control Center. And this Operations Control Center works in close collaboration with the French National Center, which we mentioned. CNES, a big player in the development of Helios. In particular, through its development of the Spot program. Now, the instruments are different between Spot and Helios, but the platforms are the same. The platform is what handles the piloting and the energy and the propulsion. Helios has better resolution than Spot, but the same the same general architecture. As a matter of fact, the two ground control teams, I think, not the same, but they share engineers. They're in the same building. That's the CMP that I was telling you about, the control center. CNES will have responsibility for station keeping, for the Earth observation, for all Earth observation satellites. The Helios system works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it has become, they say, the Army's most important provider of images. I think Helios 1A has delivered thousands of pictures, especially making itself useful during the Kosovo crisis, if you remember that, some months back, for locating refugee camps and troops. A word on the orbit. We mentioned sun-synchronous orbit, which is where it is going. It's a low orbit, roughly 700 kilometers, which is a reasonable compromise, if you will, between good resolution, which comes from being in a lower orbit, and a wide swath, which comes from having a higher altitude. It's also high enough, 700 kilometers, to be out of many of the atmospheric conditions, which can age a satellite prematurely. There is separation of Clementine. So the Ariane mission officially over with a successful launch now of the two satellites, the main passenger and the auxiliary. We will await word from our speech givers. We are due to hear from Jean-Marie Luton, Ariane's chairman, and then I think we're going to go to Paris to CNES headquarters, and we'll hear the CNES president, Alain Bensoussan. And then we should hear from the defense minister, the French defense minister, Alain Richard. We are scheduled then to come back to Kourou and hear, here's your replay.
Top. Allumage.
We're going to come back to Kourou and hear from Monsieur Luton again, and maybe we'll have another replay, and then we will say goodbye to you. So what we're doing now is we're waiting for the mics to be set up, and Jean-Marie Luton, who's ready to give a speech to you, Mr. Luton, whenever you're ready.
Messieurs les ministres,
Mr. Ministers,
Messieurs les ambassadeurs,
Mr. Ambassadors,
Messieurs les parlementaires,
members of Parliament, general officers, it is with great pleasure
que je vous annonce
that I announce the success of the putting into orbit of Helios 1B. For Ariane Space, this success of this mission fits into the heart of the space policy pursued in Europe for 20 years. It is a strategic mission. It is a European mission for the benefit of 3 countries, France, Italy, and Spain. It is a mission using a European means developed jointly, Ariane. Thank you. Thank you to all our teams, industrialists and operationals in Europe, in Guyana, who have worked for this launch. And I would like to recall that it is the 6th within less than 4 months. It is also the 50th successful launch of Ariane 4, which shows the quality of the technological effort and the mastering developed since now a number of years. So I would like to really wish all the best to those who are going to take over, because this is not completed. The satellite starts its life, and for the CNES team, for the aerospatial Matra teams, for the Alcatel teams, who are going to control this satellite and enabling it to be as efficient as the one rotating now. It's up to you now. I would like now to give the floor to President Ben Soussan, who is at the CNES, and I would like to tell him, well, now it's up to you. The Space Center in Guyana achieving wonderful performances. There will be 3 flights in December, which is really a lot. And of course, all teams who have worked on this Helios mission, the industrialists, the CNES, and it's a very, very important moment, very emotional moment. Mr. Minister, you have the floor.
This launch is a complete success, and the first thing is to congratulate all the teams, and I know that there are many people. There was a wonderful cooperation between all the artisans of that success. Well, that launch was handled in a very successful way, and you are strengthening thereby the technological influence of our airspace industry. You're highlighting the excellency of the launch vehicle, of industrialists, of Matra Marconi Space and Alcatel Space, which developed the optical instruments. And that shows that your teams are of high quality and reliable, and France, Italy and Spain are cooperating on that program, and I would like to welcome their ambassadors who are present here today. And this defense satellite, Helios 1B, will make it possible to follow on the missions of Helios 1A, which still works very well, but at the same time it will multiply by 2, it will double our shot-taking capability. The new satellite, Helios 1B, has improved features in terms of access to information, and it is more flexible in use. I'd like to recall that for modern military intelligence, space systems are extremely important, and I'd like to pay tribute to all my predecessors who gradually developed that program. And I saw that Paul Kiles is there and that he attended the launch. I'd like to thank him for being there, and I'd like to say that this shows that we are cooperating on the space programs, and this is a message that we have to deliver to our institutions. Space is a vital means of getting intelligence in order to assess situations in case of conflict. Helios 1 provided more than 3/4 of the information we received during the Kosovo crisis, and it has made it possible to assist international decision makers. But beyond our cooperation with our Italian and Spanish friends, through the European Satellite Center in Torrejon, we can produce images necessary for the supervision of what is happening in Kosovo, where we have a mission. Users will prefer images sent by Helios, so that launch happened at the right time, at a time when we're developing our observation capabilities, and we know that the debate that we're having with all our European partners right now lead us to be optimistic as to our collective capabilities in terms of space observation. I'd like to congratulate you all. I'd like to wish good luck to all those who will be using that satellite. I'd like to give the floor to Yves Blaise, who's representing the Ministry of Defense at the Guyana Space Center, Centre Spatial Guyanais. Thank you, sir. The atmosphere here is still very emotional, and I'd like to congratulate also all the teams of Ariane Espace, CNES, DGA, the prime contractors, Space Platform Arcade Space and Alcatel Space, all the industrial teams, the French, Italian and Spanish teams on the industrial side. I'd like to thank them for their efforts, which are really properly rewarded today by this great success. The government satellites, Helios 2 and Syracuse 3, and the improvements of Ariane 5 will complete those efforts. It is not only a technical challenge, but also an economic and political challenge. We have to face up to such challenges in order to develop such systems, and that helps us have our right position, especially vis-à-vis the US. And I wish that this European cooperation in the field of space will make it possible to stand up to those technical, economic and political challenges. Once again, congratulations to all the members of the teams.
So you heard the...
Bien.
With 50 cameras on, presented to Mr. Luton.
This is for later on. This is to celebrate this 50 years successful launch in a row. But let's say a few words for the future. The next launch of Ariane will be the new version of Ariane 5. It will take place on the 10th of December, here of course. And on board we will have a scientific spacecraft with a normal contract with Arianespace, and it will take place on the 10th of December. So now I would like to invite the representatives of DGA, of the staff, our Spanish friends, our Italian friends, to come and blow up the candles, this cake with 50 candles. Could you please come close to this cake?
So a very nice ceremony celebrating, as Jean-Marie Luton said, 50 consecutive successful launches of the Ariane family. The representatives from the French, Spanish, and Italian armies, Air Force, are going to help Mr. Luton blow out the candles. We may go to another replay, a second replay from another camera. If we have that, we get that in time, we will pass that along to you. While you're watching the festivities, Ariane has contracted with over 200 satellites, and the breakdown by builders of the 86 satellites launched by Europeans, Matra, Marconi Space, tonight's builder, has the lion's share of those with 40. Here comes the replay.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Allumage.
Successive success of Ariane 4. It's a worldwide record. Thank you very much for your loyalty, and see you very soon.
As you know, the Launch Space Director, thanking everyone, as did Mr. Luton and all the other partners tonight. Those very fine shots of the daytime launch, you mentioned how rare it is, a daytime launch. We've had 3 recently, of course, the 503, 502, 501 for Ariane 5. 1 in 98 and 1 in 97, 1 in 96. And of course the earlier qualification flights for the launch vehicle, the 3 Ariane 5 flights were also qualification flights, but the very early days of the program, flights 01 was called actually, 01, 02, 03, and 6 were also what they call promotional flights, and they took place during the day. But the main commercial flights, there only have been 5 of them before today. That was Flight 75, Helios 1, and Flight 63 was a Turksat, and some others. There was the first Ariane 4 in 1988, and Flight 14 in 1985. But we don't want to leave you without giving the answer to the quiz. How many military sats has Ariane launched prior to tonight? The answer, 6. 3 Skynats, 1 Helios, and the 2 you probably forgot was the STRVs for Britain. So, with that, we'll see you next Friday for 504. This is Joshua Jampel saying thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the broadcast.